Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Finance and Accounting Show. And today we have a great guest on because one of the things that you really think about is if you're in finance and accounting and you want to start a business in the field of finance and accounting, one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is going from just being a person who has a technical skill to actually focusing on building the business, because it's very different from building a business in the field of finance and accounting and actually doing the finance and accounting work. So today I have a great guest on that is leading an amazing company that is doing some great things in the field of finance and accounting. So stay tuned for today's episode. So without further ado, let me bring on my guest. Ben, welcome to the show.
Hi, Terrell. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, Ben, you're leading a very dynamic and awesome company that is growing. And before we jump into the details of that, can you tell people a little bit about your background?
Sure. Yes. So I started off in public accounting in the Washington D.C. area. Got my CPA there at Ernst and Young, and then after that went to Fannie Mae and did financial reporting for a few years. So kind of come from this big company auditing and reporting background. And then when I started SoftLedger, I was working for a company that I was managing a few different areas in the accounting department for them, public company in Chicago, and it just took too long to get financial data each month, and that led me to starting SoftLedger, which is a kind of a we're focused on getting financial data as quickly as possible. It's a general ledger, full-featured accounting system.
Nice. Now, one of the things that I'm curious about is, when you went into working for Ernst and Young, was that kind of prior to that, was it a goal to get into Big Four, or was that something that just came about as a opportunity as you got closer to graduation?
Yeah. So that was actually, so I wanted to start my career in accounting. I knew that that's what I wanted to do, and it seemed like it made sense to start at one of the Big Four. And so I applied to a few and got into Ernst and Young's internship program, and then that led to a full time offer.
Okay, nice. Now, were you from the DC area already?
Yeah, I grew up in Bethesda, which is a suburb right outside DC, and then I went to University of Maryland. And that's actually Jeff, my co-founder, went to University of Maryland too, so we've known each other for a long time.
Okay, nice. So from University of Maryland into Ernst and Young, did audit for a couple of years. Now, how is it like, switching from doing audit for a couple of years to going into financial reporting?
So that transition was kind of a smooth one because a lot of the financial reporting group at Fannie Mae was former Big Four or other public accounting firms, and it was kind of like you're getting is big companies. You're getting data from a lot of different work streams within the company, and reviewing that and assembling the financial reports. So it was definitely different. It was nicer to be same team on the same team when asking for information, but it was a similar flow. Yeah, you gotta you know less pushback, I'd say.
It's one of those things. I think back to, my time. Like I started off and working for Ernst and Young in the Charlotte office. And like I said, I remember those days of like showing up. And I guess people said I always looked young, or I looked younger than I was. So if I'm in the elevator, if you're like, "Oh, are you here to see one of your parents?" I was like, "No, I'm with the auditors." Then it's just kind of like, "Oh, you're one of them."
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that, you're, in your early 20s and you're already asking questions that are like, you kind of you feel like you're putting yourself out there. So yeah, it would be good to look older. And I know I was definitely in that same boat when I started as well.
Gotcha. Now, how do you think it really helped you as far as like, with audit? One of the things that, about that is you get to see how so many different companies really handle, their accounting, their reporting, looking at some of their systems. How did that experience play any role into you starting SoftLedger?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that's really like the reason that I wanted to get into accounting in the first place is you learn, the full picture of a company's financials. Is it really, that's the full picture of the company. It's kind of inescapable that everything that really is significant in the company should have some financial impact. And so as you're going through the audit, you kind of see all these things that really force you to think about the business. And then yeah, I mean, that was a great start to my career, is going through those, having a variation of different clients we were auditing.
Gotcha. Now, when you moved over into, working, you left public accounting and you started working in financial reporting, were you shocked at all of how, the sausage is made from, being now no longer being an audit, but actually having to be part of that process of creating the report? Were you surprised at how that process worked?
Yeah, you get a little bit of that uh, when you actually have to prepare things. You realize, oh, this is why it's a little tricky to do this when you're on actually assembling all the documents that then the auditors are poking holes in. I will say that given uh, uh, given that we were in financial reporting, a lot of the actual preparation of the source documentation was happening prior to before it got to us. So a lot of that I didn't even really get into the meat of until the job I was at, that I mentioned right when I started SoftLedger, was um, kind of more managing the various areas in the accounting department, and being more on the creator side of different documents.
Gotcha. Now, as you move more into that creator side of, kind of managing the documents and stuff, were there things there that stood out to you when you were looking at the process, like this part just like really takes us too long?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's what. So much is in Excel, and that makes sense, and that's not going to go away anytime soon. But there's so much collection of data that's Excel based and manual, otherwise not Excel. But you have to do all this manual stuff to get the data, put it into a spreadsheet, calculate what the journal entries are, then load it into your accounting system. And then in our case, we then exported all the journal entries, and that really drove the financial reports that we ultimately, the management made decisions off of. And so it kind of seemed like, okay, yeah, Excel's not, we're not gonna be able to cut it out entirely, but this has got to, there's has to be a way to do this in a little bit more of a direct way, leverage the system more. Maybe uh, maybe this can be quicker just based on the technology available today. And that's kind of the light bulb that went off when we started SoftLedger.
Nice, nice. So now, as you were working at that company, I mean, what was there any like defining moments for you that made you really see that, what Soft Ledger is like the answer? Like that's where I need to shift my attention. Were there any moments like that for you?
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty much, it's kind of what I was describing, is you can basically, based on the journal entries that come out of the GL, if you have enough context with them, there's enough dimensions that are tagged from there, you should be able to take that and automatically generate financial statements. And so when I went through and realized, okay, so we're really making decisions off of this workbook that's largely driven off journal entries. Obviously, there's some VLOOKUPs and things to enrich the data and add in more context, but basically it's off this Excel file. The thought was, okay, so if we've rebuilt a GL from scratch using all the latest cloud technology, could we make this faster and better? And that's really what led us to start the company.
Gotcha, gotcha. So now, when it comes down to with your co-founder, at what point, kind of in your journey, did the two of you kind of reconnect and really just combine brains on, hey, how do we really start building a business around this solution that we've come across?
Yeah, so I just started drawing sketches of what I thought an accounting system should look like, just some screens, just to get something on paper. Um, and then brought that to Jeff, my co-founder, and said, could we do this? Do you want to take a crack at building an accounting system? Because he went the computer science route. He's been building applications for a long time, and so that he brings that whole side of actually how to turn this into a reality. And so he said, okay, let's give it a shot, and we just kind of iterated on nights and weekends for a while, and then yeah, ultimately we got our first funding and moved out here to the West Coast to LA, and yeah, I've been growing the company ever since.
Awesome. So what was that journey been like? I mean, with, moving to LA or moving out to the West Coast and kind of getting in the environment where there are other tech companies, like how much has that kind of played a role in how you guys have moved forward in your journey?
It's played a huge role. I mean, we were coming from regular full-time jobs, never started a company, didn't really have a lot of exposure to what that meant, and the that whole environment. And so this really helped us. We moved here and got into a startup accelerator that came with some money and some advice, and that was all really critical for us. I like to say screwing up less at the beginning, because there's a ton of decisions to make, and there's a ton of ways you can go wrong. And so that was having that good advice, being plugged into a network of other founders, and tapping them when needed was really critical in us getting going in the first place.
Gotcha. So at this point, is the product fully operational and you guys have, full users on the platform?
Yeah, and that's been the case for years now. Our first paying customer went live in January of 2018, and we've just been growing ever since. We've got customers all over the world, and yeah, they're relying on us for their internal books and records. In some cases, it's the subledger, but in most cases, the vast majority, they're using us as their full accounting system.
Gotcha. So what was that journey like of like getting that first customer from, because you went from, hey, working full time to like, hey, let's do this idea. Now you're learning to be an entrepreneur and what all that means. And then getting that first customer, what was that kind of process and journey like?
Um, yeah, it's a good question. I expected to hear no a lot. I didn't expect to hear no as much as we had to hear no before getting the first customer. I thought it'd be like 100 times for the first yes. It's more like 10,000. So it just basically we had something. We had a prototype when we moved out here, and we realized that really wasn't as much as we thought it was when we started just setting up demos and trying to sell it. And by doing that, it was a painful process, but we learned quickly on what we needed to build, and we just kept on iterating. And then, we moved out here in February of 2017. And so after about 10 months of that's when in January of 2018, that's when we got our first customer. So it just took a lot of that. And even, version one of the product had a lot of work to do, but we just kept on building and iterating on based on customer feedback, figuring out, what feedback we wanted to build. You can't build everything, so you have to be really deliberate about what you add next. And so we've just been doing that for a while. I mean, and there's still a lot to do, but obviously by now we have a full application with lots of different modules, lots of functionality, and yeah, so it's come a long way.
Awesome. So as you kind of continue navigating like that, the iterations of the product, now that you guys have a product that, your customers around the world are liking the product, they're using the product, how are you guys approaching, the continuous innovation process? Like how are you approaching getting feedback from customers and still working on your roadmap?
Yeah, it's just there's no easy answer. It's just kind of digesting like all the new feedback that comes in. Most of the time it's not new. It's just a customer or prospect says, "Oh, do you have this? This is important." And we go in and see where that's at in our product roadmap. We've probably discussed it and scoped it out. And so we just try to ruthlessly prioritize what's next each time. And obviously that the most of that comes from current customer feedback. In some cases, there's a big customer that we're going after, and we might decide to go, okay, well, we'll maybe move this thing up our timeline on the roadmap just so we can get this new customer. But most of the time, it's just like long-term strategic. Like, we think that this next feature would be good, is most impactful for our customers.
Gotcha. So at this point in your journey, how many people do you have in the company that are employed by the company that are helping you kind of continue moving this vision forward?
So we have 12 full-time employees now, and yeah, we're hiring. We'll actually be at 13 in the next couple of weeks, and growing from there. Yeah, we have a few open recs out, and yeah, these are some roles that'll help us get to that next level, and probably raise some more money and blow that out even further. At some point later in the year.
Gotcha. Now, I want to talk about, how has that transition been for you? I mean, with having, being the CEO and leading the company, in your prior life where you may have had the experience of managing other people, but it seems like it would be a little different when you're the CEO and you're leading a growing organization. How has that been for you?
Yeah, it's definitely been a change. I went from closing, I closed the books on January of 2017, and then I left and didn't do much accounting anymore, except for our own internal books, which were a lot less complicated. And so, yeah, I mean, at first it's like, it's just two of us. So it's just, everything that's not building the product, that fell firmly under me, and scaling it and figuring out all the things that were in Jeff's side of things. And that just changes over time. I mean, what my role was then is now much different now that we have a team, and it'll just continue to change over time. Is what I'm realizing is, to the extent now that I'm working on something that was under me, that's like a task that could go with someone else, probably makes sense for someone else to do it, or at least have a path toward getting there. And you're just constantly doing that as you grow.
Gotcha. And what has it been like for you? You mentioned about, raising funds and, getting investment in. What has that part been like for you of managing the organization's relationship to those funding sources?
Yeah, it's just, you constantly talking to new investors, keeping relationships going with existing investors. So it's just kind of an ongoing process that you're always working on. And then when it comes time to actually raise a round, you make that into more of a deliberate process where you kind of, see who you've talked to in the past, and maybe some folks that you haven't, add them to the list, and just go through and talk about the round, get your story together. The building and the iterating on the investor deck is its own thing, and so yeah, it's just kind of it's something that you have. There's always a little bit of my time that goes to that. Less right now, but as we get closer to raising our next round, we'll be picking that up a lot.
Yeah, well, I wish you all the best in that part. I remember of with a couple companies that I've worked with where we've gone. I served as like the director of FP&A, and we were going through raising about 65 million in funding, and just the number of iterations of the financial model, the investor deck. Yeah, I definitely wish you all the best in that part of the next step.
Thanks. Yeah. It's you're never done. It's what's that? There's some Winston Churchill quote that's like, I found plans to be of like little importance, but planning to be absolutely essential. It was something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but that's it. You're just constantly planning, and as soon as you have the plan done, somebody's looking at it and making some changes. But that process is super helpful, also just for running the company as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I want to switch attention a little bit to the actual product and just kind of, what are some of I guess you say, what are some of the pain points that your customers are trying to solve when they make that decision of going with your product?
The biggest one is always just it comes down to time. It takes too long to get to turn, what was the financial impact of your operations into a nice, financial report that you can use to run your business. And so that's really the thing is removing friction in that process, directly connecting operations to financials whenever possible. In real time when possible. That's not always the case. Sometimes there's just realities of running the business that some data is just not available right away. But that's really the goal is try to get each, you kind of go down your list of your chart of accounts and say, where does this come from? Where does this come from? Let's see how fast we can make each of these flow into your financials. And that's really what we help them with.
Awesome. Now, what size of companies do you find that are using, like, what size does the company need to be, or when they start using your product?
It really depends on the company and industry. So we have companies that have started, and a number of employees has usually been the best proxy for us. So most of our customers are between 50 and 200 employees. But on the lower end, we've had customers that have joined with 5 or 10 employees even, because it was just the complexity came really early. That's what it matters when your accounting is complex. So you could be 5 or 10 employees in an e-commerce business that's moving a lot of product and need to, especially with physical inventory, you need that early. And then companies with crypto, that's been another big one where that's really complicated even when you're small. But then, for other companies like a software as a service company, you could be at 100 employees before you move off your small business software because there's good enough tools out there. You can kind of scale with it and then, kick the can down the road. So it really depends on the industry.
Gotcha. Yeah, I would say after being a part of a couple of system transitions, one of the things that I always found to be a pretty interesting challenge in the industry was, if you weren't a very big company, like I've worked for multi-billion-dollar companies where, there are systems that are designed for that. And if you're a really small business, like now in my practice, there are several small businesses that are on like QuickBooks or Zero or something. But if you're in that middle, there didn't seem to be a lot of solutions for you. So, are you finding that a lot of your customers are seeing or saying the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what's happening is there's a real big gap there. You outgrow QuickBooks or Zero or another small business system, and you have to move up to a much larger, complicated system, and you need to build out your accounting department and do all these things that maybe you're not ready to do. Maybe for your company, you never really need that type of system. And so there is this gap there. And so that we fill that gap well, and we can also scale to larger companies. Just depends on the business. Sometimes, sometimes it just will never make sense to get to a really like large, complicated ERP.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Now, you mentioned about, the inventory accounting and stuff. So is there an inventory module built into the platform?
Yeah, we have a full inventory module. Yeah, that even includes light manufacturing built into our platform. So you purchase order management, sales order management, inventory, kitting, all that. We do it.
Okay, nice. Because that's one thing I found to be a weakness in some of the other smaller business systems, where it's like at a certain point, when you start getting involved with inventory, to where those smaller business systems tend to have a lot of weaknesses and really take a really good bookkeeper or accountant that can kind of work around it.
Mhm.
But yeah, so that's awesome that you guys have that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, that we saw the same thing early on, and it took us a while to really beef up the functionality to where it is today. But yeah, it's come a long way. It's a pretty robust inventory management system now.
Nice. So, if people are interested in finding out a little bit more about Soft Ledger and seeing the product, maybe requesting a demo, where's the best place for them to find you guys online?
Best place is probably our website, just softledger.com. You can look up there and see, we're on various social media platforms, and we have contact info there, and it is easy to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Awesome. I love it. Well, before we wrap up, one question that I really love asking, every guest that comes on is, when it comes down to where you've been in your journey and the things that you've learned along the way, what's two things that you would share with other business owners? And it could be something that you've already shared that you want to reiterate, or it could be something completely new.
Sure. So I guess, coming from my background and starting this company, thinking about accounting early is important. It's not always going to be, or maybe it's never going to be the most important thing. Hopefully, it's not. You can just focus on running your business, but it's important to think about, especially as you grow, and not put it too much in the back of your mind, because it can really be the thing that it could be the thing that makes your business, is the difference between your business continuing and not. Especially, we've seen so much uncertainty over the past few years. If it takes you a while to figure out how you're doing, your financial position, and how you've been performing, that could really impact things. You need to know that information to know what to do next. And then I guess more on the, coming from the accounting side and then starting your own business, obviously you need to be realistic. There's not early on, there's not a ton you need to do accounting wise. Like you can get away with just focusing on your business. That's the most important thing. And then figuring it out as you go. And just, it's a stepped process to, you could do a lot yourself and maybe just get some partial advice, and that will be totally fine for a while. It's just, something to keep in mind as you grow.
Awesome. Well, Ben, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks again for having me. Yep.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Finance and Accounting Show. If you like what you heard, don't be selfish. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and then share this with a friend, because you know a business owner that could definitely use this insight. So be sure to hit that subscribe button, share it with a friend, and turn on the notification bell so you get all the updates when we release a new episode.